welcome back to this week's episode of Tuesday Tips with Ryder Realty. I'm here with Esta Ryder again, and today we're going to be giving you tips on city living versus country living.
So we should put our disclaimer in that this is 100% just fun,
Yes.
two girlfriends talking, and this is really no real estate wisdom in this at all.
No.
So let's start with city, just kind of what we've done. So I grew up on a half an acre with it was in the country, but just all half acre lots.
Okay.
My husband grew up with 4 acres.
Okay.
So
I grew up with 12 acres.
Okay.
So I think we all have similar.
Yeah, but your husband grew up in town.
Yes.
With no garage, just a shared drive? I can't remember. Was it a shared driveway or?
I think so.
Okay.
And then when he was 18, they moved to 5 acres in the country.
Yeah.
So we're definitely qualified to talk about
Yeah,
this.
we've got it all now. So for the country living, I think people need to understand what they're looking for. I remember I had a house listed and it was several acres. And so people would come see this house all the time because of the price. It's in the country and it has, 4 acres. And they're expecting it to be no neighbors. Well, right next to it on the one side, because the house was kind of built on the corner of the lot, was another house. And right by, so you could see 3 different houses, and people would be annoyed. And I'm just okay, but it's 3 or 4 acres. I mean, my in-laws have 4 and they have houses, all around them too. So you can have privacy with 4 acres or space to roam, but you can have even more privacy with 1 acre if it's, surrounded by farmland. So acres doesn't mean privacy. So maybe people need to kind of clarify what they're looking for.
Yes. And I've had that talk with some of my clients where would you rather have smaller yard and more private, or a ton of yard, but you're not private, you're on a busy street or something weird like that.
So here's the deal with where we are now. We live in town. We have a third of an acre, a little more, and that is enough. So even though I lived in the country my whole life and would ride, until I was 16, I'd ride my bike there and whatever. I was not designed to live in the country for 2 reasons. Number one, as a driver, because I hate driving in the dark country roads at night.
Oh, I do too.
I hate it. I can't see the lines. I don't know what things are going to jump out of the ditches. So I need to be interstate driving or, towns with lines in. That makes me more comfortable because I just don't like to drive at night as well. But my in-laws have 4 acres and 2 ponds, and we love to go there and get the kayaks out and fish and things like that. That's a lot of fun. And we will go there, and we used to have campfires now. We have them at our house now. But
now the flip side to that fun is how many hours do they spend a week mowing?
Exactly. That's my thing is I come home and it's less yard and it's in town. And I am totally fine with that. So it just depends what you're looking for. But the plus is that there's, certainly to some degree, there's more fun things to do there with the ponds. But when we come home, we are a block from my kids' school. So we can go to the playground and play basketball up there. We can walk to the library. We like to walk to, when we lived in another town, we would walk to the ice cream stand. You can't do that on 4 acres on a rural road.
Right.
So there's pluses that we see of living in the town. I hate walking. I'm a big wimp. I hate walking in the country. I don't want things to come out of the ditches and try to bite me. I don't care what it is. Possum, raccoon, whatever. It's there. When I'm in town, the worst I have is someone's dog, and usually it's on a leash or there's an invisible fence because I am terrified of that, which most people are that's probably really weird. I like to be on the sidewalk. I don't want to have to worry about scooting over for cars coming down the road and stuff. So some people might not bother them.
To riding your bike on country roads and things like that. My husband grew up riding his bike all the time. I hardly ever rode my bike. And then also, I never went trick-or-treating as a kid because we didn't have sidewalks. So I totally missed out on that. We would go to our church and things like that. But actual trick-or-treating, I never did as a kid. So it's always a big deal every year during Halloween that I take Charlotte and Kason trick-or-treating because I didn't get to.
Yeah, you didn't have that. Yeah.
And now we live in an allotment, so we have that option.
Yeah. So I think both of them can be good. They just offer, different things. I think it's more to be aware of what your, lifestyle is too. Like you said, they spend a lot of time mowing that land.
Oh, yeah.
And our little lot is enough time, but it's not A lot.
Like my parents have a big lake and they actually have to have aerators in the lake so that it doesn't get the algae and stuff. And those are expensive to buy. And then you have to pay the electric to keep them up. Trees come down. He's always out there cutting trees and dead trees and stacking wood. And it's a lot of upkeep. And personally, I don't want to deal with it. And that's why I've convinced my husband to not live in the country right this second, but he wants to live in the country very bad.
Now, why does he want to live in the country?
He just wants privacy. He says he wants to pee outside without neighbors looking at him.
Do you know how many guys say that?
A lot.
A lot. Yes.
That is definitely a selling point for country houses, I guess. But where we live now, like we have neighbors on the sides, but we have fences, so it's private. And then we have an open field behind us. Mm-hmm. So we kind of have the best of both worlds where we're at now. And the only upkeep we really have is our pool, our flower beds, and then mowing. But we're not mowing 5 acres, so.
Yeah. And I know that when we lived in the country, we rented a house on a 50-acre farm. So there were other neighbors around and it was beautiful views. And if I needed something, then I could check on them because I'm the one who's like, oh crap, I'm halfway through supper and I'm short one egg or whatever. And so living in town, I've had multiple of my neighbors help me with different things. My one neighbor who passed away, she used to help me with get the wine. I can't open a wine bottle to save my life. I haven't figured out how to do it. And she'd always help me with that when I was cooking and needed that to throw into the recipe. So if you're somebody who counts on other people, whether it be, for something like that or, hey, I'm gone. Can you check my mail? Sometimes that's easier in the city, but not necessarily because again, country doesn't mean you have nobody around you necessarily. Right. You could have neighbors, but that's something that we have liked.
I have clients right now. He wants more country living. She wants more closer to family and things like that because he works out of town all the time and she feels safer living with neighbors somewhere close by that she could go to if she needed something, an emergency. And of course the upkeep too, because he's not there to always take the upkeep. It's a lot on her.
Right. Well, go ahead. Sorry.
Another thing is I also had clients recently that were interested in a house that set way back off the road. And they made a very valid point of, who's going to plow that driveway? I need a snowblower. I'm going to have to buy a way bigger tractor than what we have now in the upkeep of a driveway versus a city driveway and having to shovel just your sidewalk maybe or something. So that's something to consider too.
Well, and some things that people assume that they shouldn't. So let's even go there.
Okay.
So like if you live in the country, don't assume even on, 3 acres that you're always going to have country around you because somebody could sell the land around you. One of my good friends lives in South Carolina and they have a couple acres, but the town they're in is growing like crazy and people are selling, hundreds of acres of farmland to be developed. And so just because something's in the country now, be okay with having neighbors, even if everyone has 3-acre lots, that's the good sized land, you're going to have room to go. But just be aware of that, that could look different or the same, depends, but just kind of be aware of that. And then if you live in the city, don't assume that you're going to have, like for us, don't assume there are not a lot of kids in our neighborhood, especially on our street that are our kids' age. So even though we live in an allotment, I'm having them constantly have friends over because there's not a lot of kids their age on our street. I don't think there's any. There's 2 girls that are close to my little boy's age, but on our entire street. And so don't, if you want to have like people close to you that you can spend time with all the time, but they're wintering in Florida and, you might not see them. And that could be fine, but just make sure that, I know some people, I have one client who specifically said, we live in the country where our kids have no one to play with. I want to move in town so they have friends to play with. And I said, but don't make that the only reason because if don't end up being kids around and that's literally why you moved, are you going to
regret it?
Are you going to regret it? Yeah. And miss the house that you had and stuff before.
So another thing you need to consider with country versus city is whether it's city water and city sewer versus a well and septic. Because when you have city water and sewer, you're paying that monthly bill, but the city's responsible for the bigger parts of the whole shebang. But if you're living in the country, you have free, quote unquote, free water and sewer every month. But if that septic tank goes bad or fails, you're responsible for paying that. If your well fails, you're responsible for paying for a whole new well.
Yeah. And I think that, I don't know that everyone thinks, I think a lot of people, but not everyone thinks about like what that water is going to taste like. People ask me, how does the water taste? Well, I used to never drink water. The last year and a half, I've gotten better, but I don't like it. I don't care whose water. I don't like it. So I'm a bad person to ask. But like our one son, he goes to his workout place that they go to, that he does not like their water at all. But like 3/4 of a mile down the road, he loves their water and he wants to drink it all the time whenever he's there. So, you know, well water can taste different in different places. Every city's water might taste different. Usually when you have city water, you don't need a water softener. In our town, you do. So, you know, if you love well water or you love city water, either way, and you're a big water drinker, you know, there's nothing wrong with having a sip of that water to see if you like it.
I've had clients test the water, taste it during the show.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny, but it's a good point. And another thing with water softeners and well water, I grew up with well water and I have blonde hair. And because of when it would get hard, it would turn my hair orange if they weren't keeping up on the salt all the time. But that's another expense to consider, is that you have to buy salt for that water softener.
And I think part of it too is don't be afraid of what you don't know. So if you've never had city water, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it.
Right.
Or if you've never had, you know, well water, that doesn't mean that a well is a terrible thing. I've known people to not buy a house based on whether it had, you know, didn't have city water or had city water, didn't have septic or had it, because that's not what they're familiar with, which is fine. That could be your criteria. But I think that you're going to get used to whatever you have. You know, I would guess. I mean, because I've lived in all different kinds of cities and country spots and had a little bit of everything. And I've never had a place that made me like water. I've not liked it. But people who like water are probably going to always like it to some degree. In some places, you know, if you are a big person who likes, you know, a bonfire and roasting marshmallows, and that is something you do every weekend, then you might want to know what the rules are for the city that you are moving into. I know I've known people who have been shocked that, what do you mean I can't have a bonfire in the middle of the town? Because they always grew up in the country. Every place is different. So if there are some things like that might be, and when I say every place, I don't mean country to city. I mean city to city for what they're going to allow or not allow. So some of those things are just good to be aware of as you're deciding country or city.
Yeah. And even things like maybe you have a pet goat and you can't have the goat in town unless it's living in your house or something, and you don't want the goat to live in your house. That might be a factor. So
yeah.
Chickens. People are really into chickens right now. A lot of times you can't have chickens in town. Definitely things that you have to consider.
If you want to live in the country because of no rules, just because you live in the country doesn't mean you don't have any rules. So there might be deed restrictions on your property where, for example, you can't have a business. And so the people who sold that land set those restrictions up to try to keep, you know, not to make it a residential area versus feeling like a commercial area. Or maybe the flip side of that is you're building your brand new dream home and you don't want it to, you want to have other homes that are just like it. Well, if you buy in an area that has no restrictions at all, somebody might put a smelly chicken farm or whatever.
Yeah.
I've never noticed them smelling, but, or, you know, something like that might, or whatever. And, you know, you might not have any say over that, or you're building your dream home and somebody is building a business next to it. Need to use the space throughout the night, like different shifts of work. And then you're trying to sleep in your, you know, dream house with this huge window that you thought was going to overlook something
beautiful,
peaceful and beautiful. And it's got a light shining because somebody needs that for the work that they're doing at night. So those are just some things to be aware of as well. But I think city and country, I like both of them.
Yeah.
I think they have their pluses and minuses, and I could be happy anywhere. It's just adjusting to the differences. So if I lived in the country, I would love it. I would love the views and the peace and quiet and being able to see the stars, but I would not get my exercise walk there. I would get in my car and drive to a place that had sidewalks.
Yeah.
But if I lived in the city, I would enjoy that. But then it would be great to go out in the country for, you know, to go on a pond or whatever.
Right.
So I think that both are great. It really just depends on your personal preference.
So I have one more little story that I was thinking of as we were talking, and then we can wrap this episode up. So I said before, my parents live on 12 acres. They have limited neighbors. There's neighbors around, but you can't necessarily see them from their house with the woods and stuff. And they live on a corner lot. So a couple weeks ago, we were looking up to see who bought this house for a lady that passed away that was technically their neighbor, but you can't see their house from where they live. And we realized that they had the last name of somebody I knew. So I texted that somebody and I was like, hey, are you related to this person? She says, oh yeah, that was my sister. Her and her husband just bought the house. They're so excited to be out in the country and shoot guns. And I was sitting there with my dad and I was like, they can't shoot guns there. Like their backyard is only, they're by an acre, but their backyard, the way it backs up, would put them shooting towards my parents' house.
Oh, geez.
So, like, if something went wrong, they would be, like, you know, going through, I mean, there's trees in between, but you can't be shooting towards somebody's house. And we were just like, like, that's interesting. So they bought this house, supposedly specifically so they could shoot, but they're probably not going to be able to shoot. And we're hoping that they figure that out before they actually shoot. But
yeah.
So consider that and like get an aerial view of like the layout and stuff of that instance, but that's my little story.
Yeah, that's very true. Just to know what you are buying and to make sure that it can do what you know what you want it to do. So yeah. And just like we were saying, if your budget is 1 acre, well, you're a very good chance that you're gonna see neighbors, but you still have space that. You know, why do you want that space? Do you want it for complete privacy? Do you want it to shoot a gun? Do you want it to have a huge garden? So, yeah, those are all the different things.
All right. Well, I think that wraps up today's episode. We are so thankful for you guys to continue listening to us. We hope that you like, subscribe, share. We need some good topics to send you guys. So reach out to us. Let us know what you want to hear. And we'll see you next week.